What we get to see on documentary, are they real footage of facts or is it just an act like every other film genre? In this presentation, I am going to focus on the core concept introduced by Bill Nikos in this week's reading, on the performative aspect of documentary filmmaking called interpretive framing. So, what is interpretive framing? According to an understanding of this term from Baden Info Core definitions, the concept of frame refers to a contextualization that places a particular assertion in a precise, well-chosen, and intentional interpretation. To establish the meaning of information, frames selectively choose certain features of complicated reality as relevant while disregarding others as temporary or irrelevant. A simple example of this term is the psychological theory of a cup half full and half empty. Even though the two terms seem like they convey the exact same meaning at the first glance, half empty suggests an observation of the negative side, focusing on the feeling of lack and emptiness, while half full suggests the opposition, directing attention onto the positive. Nikos once argued, based on Wilkinson's suggestion, that facts do not speak for themselves. They must be seen and heard and thence interpreted, an act that fishes in multiple directions depending on the purposes and goals of the interpreter. These facts, when being in a documentary, would be placed within a specific interpretive frame that then establishes the evidence, which means truths in documentary are not just being found, but are rather an act that is being created and represented in a way that filmmakers intend to make the audience perceive. They connect the fragments together into building a picture of a social and political frame that evokes specific emotional responses. Let's have a look at this example.
Most of the white Americans I've ever encountered, sure they have nothing whatever against Negroes. That's really not the question. Really a kind of apathy and ignorance. You don't know what's happening on the other side of the wall because you don't want to know.
In America, I was free only in battle, never free to rest.
We need to take action, any kind of action, by any means necessary.
They needed us to speak to cotton, and now they don't need us anymore. Now they don't need us, they're going to kill us all off. Because I'm not a nigger. I'm a man. But if you think I'm a nigger, it means you need it. And you got to find out why. And the future of the country depends on that.
In this documentary, directed by Raoul Peck in 2016, the director used Bowen's incomplete text to tell a story about racism in America through personal interpretation of emotion and politics rather than conventional historical narratives. He did not use merely the untouched historical footages, but the film rather showcases a sequence of selective images that illustrates police violence, alongside the narration of Bowen's interview to frame the story that reveals continuous racism by tying the elements of the past and present together. As Nikos stated, when facts are used in rhetoric, they become evidence, and that rhetoric gets the power to make people believe when it can link evidence to an external realm. In this case, the director does not just put the evidence, the images from the past out there, but his interpretive frame has affected the way viewers perceive this information, making it relevant to the present that calls for action to make changes in society. Another example of documentary creators that have successfully integrated this effect into their work, proving Nikos' point on the direction of the documentary genre as seen in the oppositional viewpoints of the two documentaries that both deal with the same factual resource, the 9/11 attacks in the United States, 2001. The documentary film Turning Point, 9/11 and the War on Terror establish a frame for the event as an American national tragedy that forever changed the global political picture. It is encouraging and educating our understanding of the gradual failure of global trust and stability with a broad use of evidence in a serious journalistic tone. Meanwhile, the documentary Fahrenheit 9/11 by Michael Moore discussed this as the starting point of the US government's excessive authority and continuous conflicts. It influences our emotional response to the event towards outrage and confrontation against political leaders through careful editing and selective cuts that use irony for critical provocation. With Nikos' claims of documentary films as being unneutral, and the factual elements in documentary are not always facts, but rather a construction of meaning from filmmakers. To what extent do you think documentary films contribute to the preservation of history, or do they work more as an immediacy platform for social and political movements?